Hello everyone, my new skill set presentation is about tracking. For those of you who might not know what tracking is basically a way to make something follow something else on camera. That might be a spell coming out of Harry Potter's wand. You want to make sure that the spell comes out from the tip of his wand. So in order to do that, you make sure you have a tracker on it, and that's how you make sure that it comes out from that specific spot, even though he might move it and wave it around. In order to do this, you need a software. So let's jump over to the software that I use for editing. Basically, this is my software. It's called Hitfilm. It is free. It has a bunch of add-on packs, as you can see down here. I bought most of them when they were on sale, so that's why I have a lot of them. But you can do most of these things in Hitfilm without these add-on packs. You just have to go through an extra step or two, basically. So let's start a new project. When you open up a new project, it basically asks you for these things. What do you want it to export to? What do you want? How long do you plan on making this? And all of this. Basically, I'm doing this with matte shots, and Matt wants it in 4K. So therefore, I'm gonna find the 4K instead of the 1080p. And we have that down here. If I remember correctly, Matt said that he is recording in 60 frames. If not, that's not a problem, because once I import something, it would automatically tell me this is actually not 60 frames, it's 30 frames, and it will tell me and ask me if I wanted to change that to 30 instead. As you can see, the layout looks a lot like any other editing software. You have the editor down here, or the timeline, you have the viewer, you have different effects. I can move these around if I want to, but most importantly, you need to import the media. Once they're fully uploaded, you can see them down here. As you can see, this one is in 4K. It is 33 seconds long. It is shot in 29.97 frames per second. Once you drag that onto the timeline, you can see here, it tells me it is different from the setting that I put in the beginning. Do you want to change that? Yes. Voila. This clip is the clip that we're going to be using, because we want to take this green screen and we want to put this clip down here into this area and replace it with the green screen. In order to do that, we need to make a composite shot. A composite shot is basically a shot within a shot. You'll see what I mean here. I will make this into a composite shot, give it a name. Let's just call it intro clip with green screen. Whatever floats your boat in this, it's up to you. It doesn't really matter, as long as your brain can make out which one is which. You then get this shot within a shot. So whatever I do in here is going to affect what you see out in the editor. So let's say that I would really like not to show this for some reason. In the editor, as you can see, now it's not being shown. Therefore, I can put anything on top of this, or I can put anything in this, and it will automatically be in this editor, which is super smart. If you want to edit more shots together, you can basically make one composite shot and then change in between two different composite shots and create this conversation that they're having or whatever, because it's two different shots. In the composite shot, this is where we also want to make the tracker. In order to do that, we select the media that we want to be tracking. In this case, this is the media. So we select that and we go over here to track. Once you click that button, this area here opens up. In this case, we don't want just position. We want double points, because we want position, scale, and rotation. Because Matt is basically shooting this, and you can see how we're slowly getting closer, and we want to make sure that we also get the rotation of the camera angle. So what we want to do here is that we want to find the beginning where the green area is first visible. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit, and then I'm just going to go a little bit forward, and then I might actually go frame by frame just to find the exact spot. I'm changing my mind. I actually want to make sure that it is when it starts to be visible. Now that it's visible and not blurred out, it actually makes the tracker way easier. And basically what we're going to do is we're going to take one of these red boxes. And we're going to basically point it up to one of these. The reason why we chose this plus sign and this green screen in particular to put in is because it's so much easier if there's something that sticks out. Want to make sure that we get this in the best spot as possible. The size is something you can change if you want to. The two different boxes that you see have two different meanings. This red box that you see in here is basically telling the computer which area do you want to find. In this case, I want to find this area because you can see this little plus sign is inside. I can move this as well. This has something to do with where you want to be tracking. It's really good just to put that in the middle. That will make it much easier for you. The green area here is basically saying in which area should I be looking for this. The good thing is if you set it big, you're basically giving it more area to look, and especially if it's something that's moving really fast. If it goes out of this green box, it's going to be like, wait, where did it go? And so you want to make sure that if you have a really moving picture, that the green area or the green box is bigger because there's more movement to the shot. The problem is if you take too big of a green box, it's gonna say, hey, this area over here looks kind of similar to this. I think it's the same. And so it will basically jump to this area instead, which we don't want. You then take the other box. Let's put that on the other hand here. The reason why I do it like this is simply because by getting the two diagonal boxes instead of just the middle or the two top ones here, is the fact that I can get the actual rotation of the shot. And so by doing this, I get a much cleaner, more precise angle when it comes to rotation. Then once before I start, I want to click on options because I want to set the error tolerance. The higher the error tolerance, the more it's likely to go and jump and say, hey, this area down here looks like that. It must be that one. The lower you set it, the more precise it's going to be, but it's also going to take longer. 10% I usually go between 10 to 25% depending on what I'm shooting. This one is a little bit blurry, so I want to make sure that every shot is good. And so I'm just going to keep it at 10%. Once you are done with setting the boxes and setting the options, basically go ahead and press track forward. You can also track backwards or you can track forward by 1 frame. This is basically going to track the exact movement of these two boxes, or especially these two plus signs that are inside the boxes, and it's going to capture all of this in some sort of data. As you can see, it's really slowly getting there, and you can see how it's moving with this blue area, and suddenly, whoa, it says, hey, I'm not sure where that box went, and so it's basically stopping for me, and then I have to make sure that I'm telling, hey, the box is actually down there. But you can continue then afterwards. Again, it says, oh, the box is moved. And as you can see, the reason why is because it's blurred so much that it's like, I'm not really sure where it is now. And so I'm just gonna help it on its way. And I think I'm gonna make it a little bit bigger actually, so it has a little bit more area to cover, and it's like, oh, okay, I can see I'm still looking for this area here. And as you can see, it just keeps on tracking. You want to get very fluent motions in this, otherwise something is definitely wrong, and you will see that later on. I've run this already, so I know that it's gonna pick up something that is definitely incorrect, and we're gonna change that later. But let's skip to the ending. Cool, it's now done. Took about 10-15 seconds, which is really nice. And as you can see, you get like really small movements here at the end, simply because Matt is holding the camera really still, but there's still some movement. And in order to make a green screen look good, you still want to capture these small movement, but otherwise this looks really great. Now what you want to do is that you want to pair this to a layer. In order to do that, you want to create a point. So we will go down here and say new layer, point. A point is basically saying track this point, but it's not going to be visible on the actual view, so you can't see this point, but it's just going to be there. Let's call this point for camera tracker. We go back to the viewer and then we basically click on the clip that we had. And we want to make sure that we click on the tracker that we made in order to get this back. As you can see, we want to put this layer onto the camera tracker. And that basically takes all of this information with all of these movements and combine them into one point. In order to do that, we want the X and Y position, and we want the rotation as well, and the scale, because we get Matt moving slowly in and out, and therefore we want that scale to scale with his movements. We then click apply and just wait for a small bit. Done. Took like 2 seconds. And we can now close this as we do not need this anymore. Now we want to figure out what it is we want to put in there. In this case, we are gonna take the next clip that is going to be instead of the green screen, and we're gonna put it in the timeline. Right now I put it here down below, which is just to show you that now actually this clip is behind these two clips. Therefore we want to move it above at least the clip that we're seeing right now, so that this comes out. As you can see, it's quite big and it's not exactly what we want. What we do now is that we take this and we basically scale it so it fits the screen. Then we want to make sure that it fits the screen. As you can see, it looks very unreal right now. It doesn't look like it actually belongs, but we'll fix that. We'll fix that in post. Want to make sure that here we also rotate it so it looks like it's in the actual angle that Matt was shooting, because it's really difficult to make sure that you shoot 100% straight unless you have actually good gear. So let's try to do what we can in order to find the most correct percentage here. That looks somewhat right. So let's try to scale that up a little bit. I'm gonna see 17. Gonna move this around a little bit, and this is just like, you just want to make it sure that it looks as good as possible. And I want to make sure that it fills up a little bit more than that. You can see how this box here is the actual thing that I have marked down here, and I want to make sure that it fills up a little bit more. Cool. Now this looks pretty okay, I would say. So what we're gonna do is we're basically just gonna take this clip that we have in here, and now we're gonna pair it with the camera tracker, basically telling this clip needs to move along to the tracker that we made. It takes a small second, and then from now on it should be tracked. Basically, if I were to go forward, this is supposed to move along with the tracker that we made. If you go back, the tracker hasn't started at this point in time because it starts when I start to move away, and you can then see the green screen. So once you press play, you can see that slowly it fits the screen, and it fits perfectly, and it's gonna move with the screen. What I'm gonna do now is basically I'm gonna take this one frame, so basically just this one frame. Now before doing all of this, I want to make sure that this needs to be a composite shot too. Now that I'm done and I made it look like the same, I know again it looks really weird with the sharp edges, and I also know that it's a little bit crooked. I tried saving that by going into the tracker and changing the track of this area. That's simply the reason because it's so blurry, it's difficult for it to track. But once we get closer, you know, this is pretty far out, you won't notice that. Once we get closer anyway, it looks better, like way better than it did before. So we're just gonna keep with that. Now I'm gonna make this one frame in the beginning here. I'm gonna cut that up simply because I want to extend this first frame so that that frame can also be slightly blurred out with this blur that you see here in the background, because the focus is on my shirt. I want to make it sure that you still can see something on the screen, so it's not just completely green, or later on in the case, because we're going to remove the green, going to be blank. I then have the clip here. What I want to do is I want to make sure that I use this first frame. Therefore, I'm going to go into the Tor composite shot, and I'm just going to take this first frame here, and I am going to basically export this whole thing here as a picture, and then I'm gonna import it into the composite shot. I now have the picture right here, and I'm gonna take that and put it in here and make it as you can see, it's a picture, so it's gonna last forever, but it's just one picture. I am gonna take it and make it into the time that I find that I want to use it at, which is probably like 2 seconds, about 2 seconds. I can go back and actually find out what I want to use it for. But now you can see, because I took a screenshot, the screenshot's big, I need to make sure that it matches with whatever this one is. So in order to match it, I basically take this one that I've edited with these free attributes, I copy this one, choose the one that I want, and basically say paste attributes. It basically then asks me, what do you want to, which attributes do we want to paste, and I want to paste both the position, the scale, and the rotation so that it matches. So now these two are the same. This just needs to be moved up simply because this one is not following the tracker. So even if I were to choose the tracker, it will not change because the tracker doesn't track right now. Remember, it only start to track after that time. Now we want to make sure that this one goes with the camera as well. So I am also going to make another tracker, remove this so I can actually see the screen. Therefore, I'm going to make the tracker for this area and this area down here because those are still visible even though it's so blurry. I am therefore going to choose this one, add another tracker, and basically do the same process again. Now, what I'm doing here is that it can't see where I'm tracking, but I want to create like a natural movement that matches as best as possible the same movement. As you can see, it's slowly going down here. And I want to recreate that down here to match this as best as possible so that it seems more natural and doesn't do like a sudden tilt all of a sudden. As you can see, it's suddenly just moved up here. Yeah, that's not where it needs to look. Yes, and now I believe that everything is how we wanted. So we're gonna make a new point, blurry point. And we basically do the same thing. We point it to the blurry point. We want the rotation, we want the scale. Press apply. We press apply. I can now close this and I can go into this one that we made. And I want to make sure that it follows the blurry point. So now you can see it slowly follows with the camera, which is just what we want. And as you can see now, the problem with this is that it is blurring out and it's not gone when my shirt is in front of it. So in order to do that, we simply want to mask out when I start to come in here, because we want to make sure that we slowly start masking out this, so this slowly comes in as my shoulder disappears. In order to do that, we're simply make a mask. Select the clip that you want to mask. You make a mask. It could be square, it could be something that you draw by freehand. You can even make curves if you want to, so it looks more natural. That's all up to you. I'm just gonna make a simple mask here so you can see, again, selecting the media that I want. And let's say, for example, I only wanted to see one person within this frame. Voila, the other one has now been cut out. You can also invert it so it's the other part. And this is basically the tool that we're gonna use in order to make sure that my shoulder is blocking some of the shot so that it doesn't basically show on my shoulder and it looks like it's behind my shoulder. So what I do, I select this. I am gonna make a mask on my shoulder because it's my shoulder which is gonna be in front of this area here, and the rest doesn't really matter because it's just this that's gonna move. So as you can see, now I made the mask. In order to make sure that the mask moves in the way that I do, I basically go into its shape and its transform, and I can make a path what you can do in here is basically you can set keyframes, which means that it will remember every single thing you do by frame. So if I set a keyframe on the path here, basically say at this point it remembers this thing, this mask here needs to look this way. What I do now is that I am using these keyframes to make sure that this moves along with my shoulder, so it looks like my shoulder is basically blocking off some part of the screen here. So now that looks pretty good. I go back one more frame, I then rearrange these again, and you basically have to do this for every single frame. And yes, it can be slightly tedious, but it is super important and it makes it look so much better. This technique is called rotoscoping, and it can take a lot of time, but it's super important. And if you've ever seen a title or something behind someone's head or body, that is typically done through rotoscoping, and that's basically them going frame by frame by frame by frame, changing small things like this, and it takes forever, but it's super important. And now it's completely gone. Awesome. And so as you can see, now we're just gonna go fast. It slowly comes forward along with my shoulder line moving. Now what I want to do with this clip here is that I want to remove this green. This green is super annoying and I really don't want the green to be here. So I am basically gonna use an effect in order to get rid of this screen. Usually it's either called Chroma Key or Luminance Key or something key. Like you can see, there's different ones, and these all do different things in order to achieve basically the same goal. And sometimes you might have to use a Chroma Key, sometimes you might have to use a Luminance Key. It all depends on what you need and effect that you're going for. But in this one, most likely I'm going to use a Chroma Key, which I'm then going to apply to the clip that I have. It's basically an effect where I can go in and pick a color and say I don't want this color. So I'm going to use the pipette tool, and I'm probably not saying that right, I'm sorry. And I am going to remove this area here. As you can see, now it's just a gray area, which is exactly what I want. I don't want this flashy green to be behind some of this, for example, whereas there was some green area or similar down here. I don't want that. I want it to be removed. Like right now you can't see it, which is good, but I think if we went back a couple of frames here, you could see it, right? Right now it's just white, or grayed out, which is better than having this. You see the difference? This is not noticeable. This is noticeable. So I am gonna remove this green here, and yes, it might remove some of the green that's up here too. As you can see, it takes out every green. I think there might be even some green out here that is removing, which is okay. Now this is the best result that I could get. There are other ways where you can really make specific that it's only this area that I want to remove the green from, but that demands a little bit more time than I want to use on this, as it's not that super noticeable that this is not green. So in this case, I'm gonna skip that. You could have made a second version of this clip and basically masked out this specific area, and then have used that specific area to say it's only here that I want to remove the green. So it is possible, it just takes a little bit more time. And if you are planning on doing something that are, you know, gonna win an Emmy or something like that, that is where you might want to use those extra few minutes to create something like this. But as you can see, it's not really super noticeable that this area for people are not green, especially now that it's blurred out. And so it doesn't really do that much of a difference in this case. The last thing that just needs to be done now is making sure that this doesn't look like it's just an overlay that's been put and slammed on top of it. And in order to do that, we are going to use some different techniques. So I'm going to open this composite shot, and I'm actually just going to make a mask that fills up this whole space, and I'll show you why in a second. So this is the full clip. And remember, everything that I do in this composite shot comes into the other one. So in this mask here, I am going to make a shape, and I'm gonna make it a little bit more round. And as you can see, it gets like this almost TV-ish version to it. And so by doing that, it smooths out the very like strict and harsh lines that there are. So it looks a little better. Like you can already see if I go in now, it looks like it's almost like bended, and it looks like an actual screen. Something just a little bit so you can see like the edges up here. Again, gets this checkered mark. This checkered mark basically means that it's see-through, and by doing that, when we do these see-through things, you can see here, this is what it means by see-through, that we get what's in the background. And since it's just black in the background, you won't notice it, and so it looks better because now it looks like an actual screen. What we need to do is we want to make sure that it's blended so it blends better in with the actual background. There are different ways to do that. I'm gonna try around and see what works the best, and then I will get back to you. I did some color correction on this just to make it sure that it looked a little bit better and that it blended in more with the natural light of this shot. So as you can see, this is what it looked like. As you can see, it stands out a lot, and this is what it looks like right now. So basically, I used a curves effect. This is also something that you will find in most other applications, not just Hitfilm. You'll find it in Resolve, you will find it in Adobe. Basically, I did a small curve. I took down some of the highlights and some of the lowlights, and I made scan lines, which is basically what you see, especially on old televisions, which is basically like these lines that go over the TV. Especially if you have a recording of a TV screen or similar, there will be these scan lines. And so you can see even just removing those, it's like a small effect, but it's small enough to make a difference. What I'm gonna do is basically, I'm gonna keep this from the beginning to the end. As you can see, it doesn't apply to this one. I'm gonna take these two effects that I have, I am gonna copy them, and I am gonna put them onto the other clip here, and basically I am gonna paste. As you can see, now it's applied to this part too. Of course, it's still not blurred out, we'll get to that. But as you can see, now it also has a smooth transition. It's perfect, that's what we need. Just as a heads up, this scan lines I think is a part of the add-on pack, so it won't come with the original, but the curves will, and you can actually multiply the curves. So if you wanted 2 of these and have them set differently, or you wanted to just do it with a specific color, you're also able to do that. Like I said, the add-ons are basically just there to make it easier. You can actually buy an add-on that will make it look like a very, very old black and white TV. It will, or maybe even those old camera films that you know where it was like really shaky and it was black and white and there was no sound. All that is something that you can buy in the add-on packs. Now, in order to make this blurry, it's very easy. We're gonna simply add a blur to it. You can then set how much blur you need on it. I want a lot of blur because as you can see, it's really blurry. So we're just gonna make it really blurry, like really blurry. Perfect. I had some trouble finding out exactly what I wanted to do in order to make it look good. But what I essentially did was that I made this picture into a composite shot, just like we did earlier. And then I also took all of these different effects that I put on it and basically again keyframed it so that in the end it would not be present, but the blur would be present. So basically, as you can see, now you can see how these values change. So right now is where I say this is the most blurry, I want you to become not blurry. And so it basically goes from less and less and less and less, just like the camera does, until it's 100% normal and it's being taken over by this other clip, which is actually moving. So now let's take a full look on how it looks now with the blur. That looks pretty good to me. Now, the only thing that we need to add on is that we want this to zoom in so it fills up the whole screen. So what we want to do now is find the place where we're going to start zooming and then where we're going to end zooming. I will then take this clip and I will make a keyframe both for the position and the scale. I will also expand this so I can see more about these specific keyframes and where exactly they are. Then I'm gonna find a place where I want to stop the zoom. I think here's a perfect place because they just walk through the door, and so it feels like it's gonna be more inviting to the audience as well. Perfect, this is the spot. Now we're gonna do the same thing but with this little screen here, because right now you can see it's only at 8%. Perfect, as you can see now, it is now doing the exact thing that I wanted to and zooming along with the camera. The only problem is, as you can see, is that this doesn't go exactly where the camera does, simply because there's some slight differences when it comes to the tracking. Therefore, I'm gonna see if I can make several keyframes throughout this period so that it looks like it's following the actual screen more than it does. This is where you can get really nitpicky, but the more nitpicky you are, the better it's gonna look and the less moving around like it wasn't a part of the screen it's gonna look. Also, the faster that you do the zoom, the better, because it actually becomes less visible in that way. Now that I'm done with this, you can see how the remnants of like the border that we made earlier and these lines that I created to give it that feel that we saw earlier where it needed to be on a screen. Now I am going to duplicate this layer that we created simply because I want all the same information from this, but we're gonna do a slight change to it because we're actually gonna make it back to the original. Now that I have duplicated, I have two of the same ones because I wanted the same information that was all here with the movement, but I want to change this one slightly. As you remember, we put all of these effects on this to make it look as it was more cohesive with what was already there. So therefore, I am going to remove those things. And I'm actually going to take the effects that we put on this mask here, and I'm going to cut that out, and I'm actually going to put it into the original one that we had here. So now we have this mask, but what we're gonna do so this still stays here is that we're gonna get this one, but we're gonna set this opacity to this one. We're simply gonna remove it completely, and instead we're gonna find out that time where we're so close to the zooming that we can start saying, hey, let's change it back to the original. Here, for example, is where I would say is a good place because we're so close. And so we're gonna make a keyframe and we're gonna go all the way to the end where it is here, where we know that it's ending. And we're simply gonna change the opacity to 100%. So now it has the original color, which would make it easier if you were to color grade the rest of the footage, because now we go back to the baseline. So let's take a look at it now when it changes from being the clip with the different effects into the clip that doesn't have any effects. Really smooth, and you can't see it, but you can see a clear difference between here, the lights. If you look at that, it's still really dark, but you go a few frames forward and you can see the light coming up and it looks way more natural. Awesome, the clip is now done. Let's export it and check out how it looks.